Chapter 6. My Mama's Meatloaf. If you fuck with my mother's meatloaf recipe, I will break your fucking kneecaps. Wow. Hold up, Wisp. Yes, Wisp? First off, you are looking great as you write your autobiography and or recording the audiobook for your autobiography? Ah, thanks, me. Right back at you. Of course, Wisp. But Wisp, I gotta throw in my 2 cents. Yes, it's true that some people think stories are better when they start at the end, like the movie Memento, which I helped write. But take a note from old Whisp Turlington. Whisp Turlington. I think this story might be best to start at the beginning. Just like my original draft of Memento, before that turd Nolan messed with my vision. A backwards movie? That's stupid. Well, you're the author, Wisp. I'm just here for my dashing good looks. Wisp, you get me with that every time. So where was I? Ah, yes. At the beginning. The year was 1965 and I was hanging out in jolly old England. But unfortunately, it wasn't so jolly for old Wisp. You see, I was going through a divorce. Now, it wasn't my first, and it wouldn't be my last. But this one stung. Yeah, those 2 days I was married to Nico were some of the happiest I ever had. Mostly because of the sex. Not with her. We never actually consummated the marriage. Yeah, I was too busy getting into a bunch of orgies in those 2 days. Wild, passionate orgies that started right after the wedding toast. Who am I to turn down a congratulatory orgy? I'm only human. I don't know. Maybe I was at fault for the marriage failing. I still think somehow the answer is, no, it wasn't my fault. It was probably Lou Reed somehow. And that's why I'll never forgive him. So there I was in England, licking my wounds and licking an ice cream cone. When who do I run into but my good friend Sid Barrett?
Oh, Wisp, fancy a lick?
Now, I knew Sid from his little-known skiffle band, the Soppy Lads. I used to play their single Sunshine Train Station on my radio show, and I hated it. Badmouthed it every time I played it, and Sid always respected me for that. And ever since then, he looked up to me, kind of like a mentor. A mentor who would spit in his face at every turn. Literally.
Thank you, sir. May I
have another? I may have hated his music, but I loved this straight-laced kid. Not enough to give him any ice cream. I don't share a cone with anyone. Not even with my ex-wife, Nico, while I'm in the middle of an orgy. Lou Reed told her that was wrong, and fuck that guy. Cut to, I'm at Sid's practice space. He has a new band the world hasn't heard of yet. Pink Floyd. What a dumb name. Right away, I ask them, hey, which one's pink? I laugh and laugh and laugh because a funny joke deserves laughter. What is a world without laughter? Probably a Velvet Underground rehearsal. Luckily, the rest of the band all chime in with raucous laughter, so I repeat it. No, seriously, which one's pink? Roger Waters takes out his notebook.
Well, I'm gonna remember that little nugget, Wisp.
Speaking of which, I'm still waiting for my royalties for Have a Cigar, Roger, and I will get them. So help me Christ. But I wasn't angry at him then. No way. Richard Wright was getting all the Wisp wrath because that motherfucker wasn't laughing at all. Just twinkling around on his dumb keyboards. He can never take a joke. But I wasn't going to let that stop me. I got right up in his face and yelled at him. Which one's pink? Nothing. Not a smile.
Not today, Wisp,
he whispered, stone-faced.
Sorry about that, Wisp. Richard's a tough nut to crack,
said Roger. Always the most reasonable member of the bunch. Which is why when I told him, that guy ever gives you shit, you pay him like an employee. Nevertheless, they want me to play some of their new tunes. So I sit back, put my legs up, and yell out, make me happy. And 2 seconds in, I am not happy. It is awful. When you've been around as long as I have, you can tell if a band is great or terrible within 2 seconds. Like all good art. And Sid's new band was about as good as the Velvet Underground. And that's bad in Wisp's book. My book that I'm writing now. Lucky for them, I had some of my mother's meatloaf on me. That's right. I don't need to explain to you, the reader, about Regina Turlington's Meatloaf. She has turned it into a frozen meatloaf empire known throughout the world as simply Mama Turlington's Loaf. A secret recipe passed down from Turlington to Turlington, and I always kept it in my pocket to munch on. Now, I'm not a religious man. Sure, I've dabbled in them all, but my true religions? One, of course, is classic rock, and numero tumero, my mother's meatloaf. It can change your perception on the world when you eat it, probably because of its secret ingredient. It was lysergic acid, aka LSD. Mama was spending a lot of time with this guy I just called Uncle Timmy. You may know him as Timothy Leary. He was the same age as me, so it was weird I called him Uncle. But it wasn't weird how I felt when I ate that meatloaf. Free, open to the world and beyond. To worlds beyond my mind. That is one damn good meatloaf.
This is real tasty, Wisp,
Sid said as he munched it down.
Whoa, I can feel me mind expanding.
Ugh, this kid was about to be tripping balls. I forgot that he had never done a drug in his life. His tolerance was not like old Wisp's. It was at this moment I realized I needed to split, because I didn't want to stick around and hear his terrible band anymore. Before I left, I yelled out, "Hey, which one's pink?" Because I know jokes are better when repeated like a catchphrase. It might have been the meatloaf, but everyone was laughing. Except right. I'll come for you next. Flash forward a couple weeks and I see a flyer for some psychedelic rock show. The Electric Strawberry Elephant Experience, or as I like to call it, bullshit word salad. Look, here's my feeling on psych rock. You call it an exploration into the inner soul through sound. And I call it, you couldn't write a riff to save your fucking life. But lo and behold, who do I see on the bill? Good old Pink Floyd. So I decided to pop in on my old friends as I popped another slice of Mama's loaf into my mouth. As I tried to slide through a sea of marijuana smoke and colored lights, I could feel the loaf kicking in. The world had started swirling around me. I was seeing colors I had never seen before in my life. I also swore I saw Paul Simon riding Art Garfunkel through the crowd like a horse.
Hey, Wisp, how's it swinging?
Not well, Art, because I was tripping balls on Meatloaf. It was at that moment my ears were pierced with the most god-awful racket. Yep, it was Pink Floyd. They had changed their music since I had last seen them. And it was worse. Just dicking around up there on their guitars while Sid stared into the middle distance. I recognized that look. I had seen it a million times. This guy had been eating Mama's meatloaf. And I was pissed. Again, this is before the Turlington loaf empire had swept the world. This guy was making his own loaf, and I wasn't happy. "Hey, Sid, you been bootlegging my mama's loaf?" I screamed at him. He stared at me with dead eyes. That little boy was no longer there. Sid was gone as he took a bite out of the meatloaf in his hand. "Is that fucking raisins in it?" This motherfucker had not only stolen my mother's meatloaf recipe and clearly put way too much LSD in it, but he also added raisins? Well, that just set me off. You cross a line when you cross Regina Turlington. So I scream out, "If you fuck with my mother's meatloaf recipe, I will break your fucking kneecaps." The music stops. Dead silence. Everyone is looking at me, including Paul Simon, who is now being ridden like a horse by Art Garfunkel. Richard Wright stands up, points at me and yells out, "Which one's pink, Wisp?" And everyone laughs. That motherfucker. The joke doesn't even make sense in this context. But the entire band takes it as a rallying cry. They clearly had all been eating Mama's meatloaf and were all tripping balls. The war had begun between Pink Floyd and Whisp Turlington. So I do the only thing I can do. I pull out a sword made of pure rainbow energy. Sid breaks his guitar in two like an egg and out pops a little gnome. And that gnome is ready to fight.
Get him, Grimble Grumble!
Now, there's one thing I hate more than psych music, and one thing I hate even more than Lou Reed stealing my ex-wife. It's a lack of respect. All that I had given Sid and this band, all the great ideas, and this is how they treat me? There can be only one! I yell out to the sky as me and Grimble Grumble fight to the death. His death. As his head gets chopped off by my rainbow sword, Sid drops before me. Clearly some weird symbiotic acid relationship. Who knew? Roger Waters comes out from behind the amp he is hiding behind. And god damn it if that tall motherfucker doesn't grow to 10 feet tall. And we wrestle each other on a sea of flowers until I choke him to death on a beautiful purple lily. Nick Mason's handlebar mustache grows into 2 serpents and wraps around me, but I break free and choke him on his own facial hair. And then, finally, it's me and Richard Wright. Mano y mano. Well, sort of. I haven't changed, but now Richard has morphed into a wild pink blob, dissolving everything that comes into contact and screaming out some awful sound.
I am pink.
Oh, yeah, that's why he didn't laugh. The joke cut too close to the bone. I get that. I don't know if it was the LSD or the murdering of all of Pink Floyd, but I felt like something had been opened up and learned a little something. Sometimes jokes hurt, and I apologized to Richard that day. Because Wisp is a big man sometimes, with an even bigger heart. I still murdered him with my rainbow sword, but I did apologize. I think we all learned a lesson that day. Flash forward 2 months later, and I wake up in Nico's bed, and I have a splitting headache. Babe, what happened?
You had a bad trip, my darling,
She said with a smile on her face. Wow, it was at that moment I wondered, did any of this happen? Was it all some crazy Meatloaf acid trip that went wrong? Did I make all of that up? Did I ever even meet Pink Floyd, let alone murder them in some psychedelic bloodbath? Who am I? What is my place in the universe? What is reality? Now, I don't know any of the answers to those questions, but I do know this. I stopped putting LSD in Mama's meatloaf after that day, but I will never, ever put raisins in it. So watch your back, Pink Floyd.